Here we go. And keep writing your names into the chat. It's interesting who is here. So, and now what we're gonna do today. First of all, I want to give you some context, how we came here, what I do, and how it comes that we commission the studies on these specific research questions. Then we go straight to the findings from Moldova, which are presented by CAN EECCA, that I mentioned in the very beginning already, and then to the findings from Kazakhstan, which are presented by Vadim, who are with me. And after the presentations, we will have some time for questions and answers, and also some time for discussion. And right after the presentations, don't hesitate to ask questions of clarifications if there are so. Okay. So, as I said, my name is Severin Ettel. I'm with BUND. We're an environmental organization in Germany, and we are lead of a EECCA-funded project. EECCA stands for the International Climate Initiative, which is supported by the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action in Germany. And we're carrying out this project. It's called Strengthening Civil Society in the Implementation of National Climate Policy. So our main interests lie in NDCs, the National Determined Contributions, their implementation, and also the civil society taking part in drafting and implementing NDCs and in climate policy decision-making in general too. And in this particular context, we collaborated with CEECCA, which is the European umbrella organization of Catholic social organizations, and directly with Fastenaktion, an organization in Switzerland, in Miseria in Germany. And we were pursuing, or we are pursuing, the question of the transparency of NDC implementation. In other words, how are international commitments translated to the local level, and if climate action is in line with nationally determined contributions, and vice versa. So our main fields of research are, like I said, the transparency. So in other words, like from top to down, from the international level to the local level, is it traceable if climate action is implemented on the ground? And vice versa, the reporting side of it, is climate action from the ground acknowledged and part of the reporting to the international level, namely the UNFCCC under the national communications. And thirdly, we looked into the realm of climate action, where we studied some cases of NDC implementation in particular, like, yeah, you will hear, especially in the energy sector, how is climate action being implemented? Let's see. And with that being said, I would like to hand over to our first speaker, EECCA. And feel free, Andre, to introduce yourself in the very beginning of your presentation for us to understand who you are, where you come from. For those who want to follow his presentation in Russian, my colleague Till, who is there to help you out, he will drop the link in the chat box. Follow this link, then you can see Andrei's presentation in Russian language for you to better follow his presentation if you like. With that being said, I will stop sharing now and invite you, Andre, to share your screen with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon in the Central Asia, I suppose. I have the pleasure to join this common activity, and I think that it was an interesting exercise to be on the same page with environmental NGOs in Moldova, but also from Kazakhstan and other countries in the region who joined this activity to conduct similar studies, and for us to see to what extent we are implementing the NDCs and our commitments under the Paris agreements in different countries, learning from this experience and having the possibility not only to compare but also to take some best examples for ourselves. I would like to share my screen now and hope this will work. Yes. And first of all, in order to have a kind of background for my presentation of the climate justice actions and NDCs in Moldova, I would like to start with a general overview of the situation, because we studied the situation for a longer period of time, because I will come to this, but with first intended national determined contribution, which was 2015. So it's not 10 years yet, but still a period of time which is quite longer. And this period of time was characterized by different situations. For example, the last decade in Moldova was with a very unstable political lifestyle. Only last 2 years, I could mention that we have a change, because we have governance which is now implementing the EU integration policies and having quite an open approach in the policy development. So this is also reflected in the outcomes, which I will refer later. But anyway, we have also factors which we could not control directly. We have extreme climate factors which influence the country, and we did not speak anymore or we did not have doubts about the impact of the climate change. And we have to do more on adaptation, and we have to do more on restructuring of economic activities in order to have enough space for the development of further economic activities in the country. This is also an impact in the region. We have this impact of the war in a neighboring country, in Ukraine. This, of course, impacted the economic and social life and the trade and the migration. So these have an impact on the activities, and of course these take a lot of responsibility and also a lot of contribution of the government to deal, and of the people of the country to deal with the situation. Of course, this was also supplemented by the energy crisis, because Moldova is depending on almost imports of energy, and this is reflected also in the policies that we need to improve our energy productivity, and we need to invest more in renewables. But now, at the moment, most of the renewables are still obtained by biomass. the share of wind and solar energy is increasing, but still not to the extent we would like to have it. This is also linked maybe because previous years there was not so much access to funds in this domain, but now the situation is improving. And especially it is improving because after a period of accession, which the status of accession country, which Moldova was holding for a long period of time, since last year, Moldova have the candidate status for the European Union, and this opened a lot of opportunities, starting with cooperation improvement, and also opening the possibilities to access to different funding mechanisms. Coming to our direct research and to the findings of the study, we tried to analyze, first of all, how at the national level, also keeping in mind that it was a quite challenging situation in Moldova, but the support which was provided by the development partners was still valuable, and the country managed to face its obligations, and the country developed the intended national contribution in 2015 based on the emission levels or assumptions which were introduced there. It was developed the low emission development strategy till 2030, and this was a key policy document for the Ministry of Environment and for the sectors to set up the actions and to have the targets for the emission reduction. Then, according to the procedures, of course, in 2020, Moldova was among the first countries who updated its national determined contribution. And in this case, after a national debate, after coordination with ministries, with the stakeholders, we have quite ambitious targets, of course, that we have an unconditional target to reduce greenhouse emissions by 70% in 2030, comparing with value of 1990. And of course, if it will be a possible support, and to be our conditional target is up to 88%. It's quite stronger target even, which is now, of course, under discussion in the situation when we have this energy crisis and when we have these changes in the energy supply, but still these targets are in force. These targets of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions were introduced in the National Development Strategy, which was approved recently this year. And we have a special chapter on environment in this strategy, and we have targets on reduction of greenhouse emissions. Based on these targets, and also based on the updated NDC, the Ministry of Environment initiated the update of the low emission development strategy in order to introduce the new targets and goals. But at this point, because it was a change in the procedures of the development of governmental policy documents, we will not have any more specific sectorial strategies. And it was proposed that the low emission development strategy 2030 will be redrafted or updated as a low emission development program with a specific action plan, with specific actions for the sectors which will have specific targets till 2030 based on the NDC2. At the same time, the Ministry of Environment now is at the final stage of the development of the environmental strategy 2030. Moldova was having its environmental strategy for 2014-2023, but this strategy is coming to its final stage of implementation. And it was decided because we have the national development strategy, and all line ministries have to update the sectorial strategies. The Ministry of Environment initiated last year the development of the environmental strategy. And by the way, this strategy is also developed with the support, with expertise of several NGOs in Moldova. And this environmental strategy now is at the stage of coordination and will be submitted later this year to the approval by the government. And another change, which was not before, because before we were relying only on some specific laws, or law on environmental protection, law on industrial emissions. Now the Ministry of Environment also is developing a special law on climate change, which will introduce the legal base for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Here you see in more details. I will not stop on this in favor of time. You will see in the presentation. This is a list of all policy documents or reports which were developed in Moldova since 2015, since the first intended national determined contribution. And you could learn about them in more details in the study, because we described them in more detail in the study. So I will not stop on this, but I will also try to add some information about the institutional framework, because when we speak about the transparency, when we speak about cooperation with NGOs, when we speak about cooperation with local public authorities, it's very important to know what are the capacities of the government for this. And for example, we have a lot of changes during the last 20 years in the field of environment, and also in the governmental structure. We were having a separate Minister of Environment for a long period of time. Then it was a very dramatic change, which we also as NGOs and the experts, we were not happy that environment was combined with agriculture and regional development. So for more than 3 years, the environmental sector was a third domain in a bigger ministry, and was not the priority one, let's say like this. So this, of course, impacted the capacities of the this part of the ministries, and of course also the funding mechanism which we approved. This was to an extent solved by the establishment of the environmental agency, which was a new development for Moldova, because before we were having only the ministry and only the environmental inspectorate, which was carrying the functions of control and supervision in the field of environment. But in the field of implementation, in the field of promotion, in the field of reporting, there was not a special agency. Now we have an environmental agency in Moldova, so it's improving its capacities. Still, they face a lot of challenges in terms of staff, in terms of funds that they need, but at least we have a separate structure which helps the Ministry of Environment to implement and to promote the environmental policies. The positive change, which I mentioned already, in 2021, the Ministry of Environment was re-established as a separate body. So we have Ministry of Environment as a separate ministry in the current governance, and this immediately improved the situation, because from 30 people who were in the previous ministries of agriculture, regional development, environment, we increased the number of staff, we increased the possibilities to coordinate the processes. So this is quite good improvement. And you see on the in the picture in the middle, this is Iordan Karadike-Iordanov, the Minister of Environment. She's coming also from NGO sector. She was Executive Director of EcoContact NGO, one of the strongest NGOs in Moldova, because we have many strong NGOs at national level. but this NGO was also involved a lot in the policy development, in legal development, and so on. So I will not describe this, but we are very happy that we have a minister who knows this background and who is very well set up in this situation. And the last change, because in February it was a governmental change. It was a change of list of ministries, and also the same governing party, but they changed the list of ministries, and they changed the list of ministries. Since February, we have the Minister of Energy in Moldova, and Minister of Energy is responsible for everything which is dealing with energy efficiency, renewables, and so on. And we have here another positive development in our understanding, that you see on the screen also the picture of the minister, Mr. Viktor Pavlikov, who is an expert in this in energy, and he was a long time expert in various projects in the energy efficiency and the Covenant of Mayors, and also the Green City Lab project. So he is very well placed and very experienced to promote. And in fact, I will speak about this later, but he was the one to announce and to align the Republic of Moldova to the European goals of carbon neutrality 2050. So the Minister of Energy is priority now, and I think that the policy documents and the activities of the Minister of Energy will be in the same direction. Now to come to a lower level, because we tried to see to what extent the provisions of the policy documents and our commitments in the NDCs are transposed or find their way to the lower level. And here, of course, there is nothing new for you, but for a longer period of time, the countries, with the support of the Covenant of Mayors and the Covenant of Mayors, yes, and here in Moldova we have also the Alliance for Energy Efficiency and Renewables. They support the local communities to establish the sustainable energy and climate action plans. You see the map of Moldova with these flags, which mark the localities which became signatories, yes, of the Covenant of Mayors. And of course, we have at the moment more signatures than the localities who developed the plans. It's less than half of the localities who developed the action plans, but this situation is improving because it's the next stage of the Covenant of Mayors East, and recently 11 more localities signed the covenant, and we have here also an improvement, and 5 localities started to develop the sustainable energy climate action plans. So we hope that we will have more localities which have aligned the local activities related to energy efficiency and climate change in line with national policy documents and NDC target. Another opportunity for the local authorities are the local plans for climate change adaptation. But here again, we don't have a national coverage, yes, because this both first one and second is a project-based activity. So mainly the localities develop the action plans with the support of the implemented projects. And of course, they rely very much on the possible methodological and also financial support for the implementation of the action plans. So here I will speak later about some case studies, some examples which we selected for this. But this is maybe one of the reasons we consider that when there is no direct opportunity or possibility to get access to the funds the localities are not so much motivated yet to start the development of such plans. I will quickly pass through the reporting period because I already mentioned the national policy documents, and here again we have to mention that the Ministry of Environment is very much relying on external support when it comes to reporting under the UNFCCC. And here, by having support either from GF, either from the Green Carbon Fund and other financing facilities, the country was able to develop its reports to the convention. And also at this point, when we are updating the low emission development, when we have the NDC2, so we will have to report next year. Already the ministry is thinking about the possibility to mobilize resources, either internal or to work with potential donors and partners in order to develop the report on the implementation. And we will see to what extent this will be possible. So you see this line of policy development and implementation will continue. And we will be able to track the progress of the country in this case. This is a sample you see on the screen, the samples of the reports, the biennial reports, the fourth national communication to the convention, also the national inventory report, which was done. We are very, let's say, happy in this case that under the Ministry of Environment for a long period of time was established the climate office, which was a project-based office mainly, working on project-based, but they were involving national experts, international expertise, and also conducting these studies in order to develop these reports. And just maybe for your general information, I added here, you see the figure of the carbon productivity, which compare Moldova with other countries and also with the EU average. Unfortunately, we are still above the EU average, so this means that the country have a potential to improvement. So we have a potential to improve our performance with green gas emissions and greenhouse gas emissions, and also in the energy efficiency. I mentioned already earlier that according to our methodology, we try to see what is happening at the national level, how this is reflected at the local level, and we try to find the examples of or best studies of these cases, how the provisions of reductions of emissions or energy efficiency find their way at the local level. And we find out that there are more projects implemented during the last years, but we find out some specific case studies which combine it, different approaches, starting by using renewables in different ways, so either biomass or the sun for the street lighting. So he is one of the examples when we see in a village here in Moldova, which is called Fiștrita, when they improve it, a lot of infrastructure in the village using various opportunities, including solar panels, biomass installations, improving energy efficiency of the institutions. And here it's important that because it's level of the community, that the local population is involved and they benefit from this support directly. In addition to the savings which the locality have, because they improve the infrastructure, they at the same time improve the living conditions of the population and improve the conditions for the kids in the kindergarten or in the schools. So this is quite good result, which also when we mentioned that we have improvements from energy efficiency side, from environmental point of view, but we also have the results from social point of view.
Sorry, Andre, sorry that I have to interrupt you. You have about 5 minutes left, and
okay,
you may want to come to the conclusions and recommendations, because I know you have a lot to say still. Just to consider that only 5 minutes are left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was not looking to the watch, but I will try. Then I will skip the other two examples so that you could see them in the study and in the presentation. And of course, I will try to use the rest of the time to present our main findings and recommendations. So we still find out that in the process of the policy developments, due to this capacity limitations which still exist in the country, the communication which exists, we still have limitations in mainstreaming of climate policies. Of course, we try to do this now in these two new documents I will mention about later. But this is one of the conclusions of the study. You know, and you have seen it from my presentation, that the policy documents are mainly developed at the national level, so as a governmental level, and there is limited communication, also limited possibility to transpose the provision of the national documents at the local level. So as mentioned, that we have small number of CCAPs and small number of climate change adaptation plans at the local level. Also, we consider this kind of limitation, that development of the national policy documents, although we have expert capacities, but we don't have enough financial and other capacities to cover this expertise. So mainly policy documents, action plans, and reports for the convention, they developed by with the support of the project, so and they are outsourced for the ministry. What is positive, of course, because we have the conclusions which are positive, that now the country is doing an effort to become more exact in their plans till 2030. So the update of the low emission development strategy, which will be done through the low emission development program, are ongoing. And now we, as the Ministry of Environment, it's at the final stage. They received all the contributions from NGOs, from other ministries, and introducing all the comments and proposals. After this, the documents, both the documents listed on the screen, they will go to the government to be approved. And of course, the National Adaptation Plan, which will cover 7 sectors, economic sectors like agriculture, transport, and also as economic sectors, this will be an improvement in activities to adaptation of these sectors to the climate change. And all policies in the country will be now aligned to the carbon neutrality. Moldova, according to the new obligations and according to the new provisions, will align with objectives and goals of the European Green Deal. So we hope that this will be a possibility for the future. Exist also challenges, but also possibilities and opportunities which result from the regional situation. We have now more opportunities for energy sector, for energy efficiency, for renewables due to the energy crisis. And this is a short presentation of our recommendations, but if you'll be interested, you go more in the study and see the recommendations which we developed for all different stages, for the transparency, for the reporting, for the actions. But what is important now, that having the policy documents as a national level, we still need to mainstream all the climate change priorities in other sectors. We need to strengthen the institutional capacities. We think that we need more responsible people at the level of the ministry, because we now have only 5 staff persons which in the Ministry of Environment. We need to strengthen these capacities, because we will need to follow on the implementation of all policy documents, and we will need to follow on reporting. We need to share and disseminate the success stories and also the experience which Moldova gained through the development of the CCAPs, and to promote it widely to other localities. Thus, we will be able to use the same approach as a national level, because I didn't mention, but this will be important, and I will mention in the next slide. And also we need a national funding mechanism for this, because when there are not enough sufficient financial resources to support the actions which the localities select for the action plans, then this become a challenge for them, and they have to look for different projects, or to see if they have the possibility to finance, because there is not enough financial capacity at the local level to improve or to change the infrastructure. This is why we also need to do a lot in the field of transparency and the field of reporting. We need to involve more the local public authorities in the development of policy documents, in the implementation, and even in the monitoring of the implementation at the local level. Here we see a stronger role of NGOs, especially at the local level. We have in Moldova, I think that we use the capacities of the national NGOs, which are based in the capital city, but they try to work at the local level and to implement projects and to cooperate with localities and with NGOs at local level. And finally, which is important for us, I think this is important capacities of monitoring and reporting, because we need to use the data from the local level for the reporting at the level of the convention, at the level of NDC, because at the moment we use the statistical data, mainly the national level, for reporting, and we less involve the data flows and data collection from the local level for national reporting. So the data flows have to be improved, and we think that the positive changes which started now with the development of the and the work of the new ministries, this will be improved. At this point, I would like to stop and to allow for questions and to comments in the special sessions. But I would like to express our gratitude to all colleagues involved in the support to conduct this study at the national level and from Germany. So we are very grateful, and we hope that this experience on conducting such studies and having the possibility to track the possibilities for transparency and to the implementation of NDC will be used in the future for reporting, and also for improving the cooperation between central authorities, local authorities, and NGOs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrei. Thank you very much for your presentation. If anyone has questions of understanding, please feel free to ask now. If you have questions for a discussion, then please keep them for later, as we will have some time left in the end to discuss your questions. I also have a question to Andrei, but I will keep it for later. If you have any questions, now is the time. Otherwise, I would now hand over to Vadim. The stage is yours. Please feel free to share your presentation.
Thank you, Severin.
And you're also free to choose your language. If you prefer to speak in Russian, you're good to go in Russian.
Yeah, I would prefer in Russian, because I would expect that some people will be interested to watch the video afterwards. So, поэтому я перехожу на...
That is why I am gonna switch to the Russian language channel. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends. Today, I would like to introduce the results of the research on climate policy, its transparency, and possibilities to trace its implementation at the level of the climate actions and justice of these actions for this society in Kazakhstan. This research also covered a small case study on renewable energy. As here, we can see the most tangible climate action. And this had to do with the mapping of the renewable energy sources and studying quite a successful project on renewable energy in terms of assessing and evaluating climate justice in the framework of such projects. First, I'd like to mention that early this year, two documents related to climate policy were adopted. On February 2, the Strategy for Achieving Carbon Neutrality by 2060, and on April 19, the updated NDC until 2030. Until recently, the national contribution existed only for the international community. It was submitted to the Secretariat of UN FCCC and was available exclusively in English language. Nobody discussed it at the national level whatsoever. Basically, climate policy is in the process of its formation, even though some climate action at that pretty large scale were happening even in the previous decade. Well, large scale, the ideas were large scale, but the results were not large scale. Say if we're talking about cutting down on the greenhouse gas emission. Nevertheless, there are tools that we can use to implement the climate policy. That is why, for now, we have to present the climate policy itself, rather than talking about it, how transparent and just it is. Now, I would like to thank our colleagues from BUND, and thank you, Severin, thanks to you personally, because basically we are the first who are doing this overview of the climate policy in Kazakhstan. Thank you so much for being so flexible when dealing with this matter. On this slide, you can see the goals in accordance with climate policy. The end goal is achieving zero netto emissions of greenhouse gases. Doesn't mean that there won't be any emissions in 2060, which is impossible to achieve. That is why the strategy mentions that in 2060, the emissions will be 45.2 million CO2 equivalent, which is about 15% of the current GHG emissions in Kazakhstan. But they will be compensated with increasing the absorption of CO2 in the LULUCF sector. Now, speaking about the targets for the current decade, the last two targets, conditional and unconditional targets of our NDC. The main target is reduction of GHG, one conditional, by 15% compared to the 1990 level. In 1990, our emissions were 380 million CO2 of the equivalent. And in the last reporting year, so now we're reporting for now we have just reported about 2021, about 341 million tons of CO2 equivalent, and our emissions are lower than 10.35% compared to 1990. But still, you should not be overly optimistic, because we are working on NDC. And we understand that 2021 was a COVID year. Before that, before 2020, in 2019, our emissions were higher than in 1990. And there is also a conditional target. It's more ambitious. Here we're talking about reduction of GHG emissions by 25% in comparison to the 1990 level. But I never supported that one because the condition there is international assistance and aid. You know, while we define the criteria for the international aid and assistance that will allow them to demand 25% from Kazakhstan, well, it will be long past 2030 because it's already almost 2025, and we have to plan and then start acting. That is why we won't be able to adjust everything that rapidly. Now, talking about the accessibility of the climate policy at the level when it was developed and passed. And you might wonder how much the civil society could participate in working on them. The first document about the NDC by 2030, as I have already mentioned, was not even available. The one from 2016, it was simply submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat, and the main languages for us are Russian and Kazakh. We even didn't have the document in either of those two. Now, speaking about the next document that was passed in February, the project of the carbon neutrality, that one was published twice. First as a doctrine, the second time as the strategy. Slightly different name, slightly different concept. Well, not slightly different concept. And mostly people could participate using online platform of open legal acts. And I know most representatives of the civil society who were providing comments to this document. And I think that most of them agree that this discussion was just a formality. It was a mere formality. Openness, yes, there probably was openness there. The opportunity to comment on the documents for only short 10-day time frame was there, but there are huge challenges was taken into account the opinion of the society. The special meeting for discussion with the civil society gave more possibilities and also participated in that special meeting. And I can tell that many of my suggestions were taken into account, or at least those suggestions that possibly were voiced not only by me alone were taken into account, and the strategy was readjusted. But this process was more limited in terms of the number of participants. And it's more efficient because the developer of the document participated in that. And if we compare it with the online portal, it's hard to say who responded to all the comments there. And, you know, they were just responding to the comments due to formality, not because they really wanted to. Also, the other draft was also discussed with the civil society online, and the problem was pretty similar. And it didn't happen with the strategy on carbon neutrality because the public council was not engaged. It was developed by the Minister of Economy. Now, let us talk a little bit about transparency of climate policy in Kazakhstan. Well, here I can talk for hours, but for now, I'd like to talk about how well-shaped it is at different levels, because we have to understand what this policy is at different levels. And at the national level, we see that there are certain elements that we can work with. Some elements that allow us to talk about certain level of transparency. There are long-term goals. There are also defined target indicators for greenhouse gases. and GDP energy intensity. So there are something that you can work on. Now, sectoral level. Situation is most transparent with energy because there are target indicators on renewable energy sources. Sadly, there are no similar target indicators for coal, for gas.
Возобновляемых источников энергии это
Well,
можно найти, они были в первоначальных документах.
you can find it for individual renewables, but not all of them. There is also planned adaptation in forestry, agriculture, water. There are plenty of errors in the documents, but still there are things that can be worked on. Now, we're going down to the local level. This is like the traffic light, the upside down traffic light. And talking about local level, I'm talking about oblast centers. You can take a look at the territory development programs, and in some cases, they mention target indicators for renewables, climate change adaptation, but even though it is there, it's very chaotic. So it is necessary to understand what the local authorities are planning to do in this regard. Because you see bits in certain documents, and it looks as if they are doing that not quite consciously. It's as if they feel that they have to add something about the renewables and about the adaptation. Now, next slide.
О том, что мы сделали, чтобы снизить выбросы парниковых.
So it describes what we have done in order to decrease the green gas emissions and set out the tools that could be applicable in order to make this results more tangible. There is the national trading system that regulates large stationary facilities, and it covers the larger sources of emissions, which are around 50% of national emissions of greenhouse gases, so 150, 200. So we see by the document, specifically the quotas that are being distributed within the system, we see that there are no significant decreases in these emissions, but we have a tool that would help us to work with large facilities, but unfortunately there is no political will, and we see that system participants are not ready to decrease the emissions. Speaking about, there are some support measures. There are some support measures in larger systems. Also, we have to say that emission decrease in cities are not that large, and we can see it by EBRD reports in large cities of over 250,000 population. So there is very low amount of decrease. There are plans of planting 1.5 billion trees up to 2030, and also reforestating forests. We have 5 sectors all in all, specifically about greenhouse gases. Industrial process include steel, aluminium, and other materials production. I'm not going to go into deeper details here. So there is a system of regulation that covers large sources in these sectors. Just as I said, there is no significant diminishing in these emissions, but at least they are reporting regularly on their emissions, etc. The waste management and agriculture provide their reports in very general terms, so you can't really calculate anything. If we check this report, we find large errors there and mistakes, for example, about land and forest use. We had a case of poor calculation of emission in these sectors. Then, speaking about our climate actions and measures and our assessment of those, we joined Kyoto Protocol at the level of developed countries and countries with developing economy. So our reporting system is very well developed, and it is an annual national inventarization of greenhouse gases. So based on the data of the national statistics, we're able to calculate emissions on the national general level by sectors, by key categories. Besides that, we receive national communications, which is important for all countries, but also you can find biennial reports, which you can find, and you can find them on the framework UN Convention on the Climate Change, and they are available in Russian, partially in English, but mainly in Russian. These reports are large. Yes, it is difficult to read them, but in order to ensure transparency, non-governmental organizations have to learn how to read them. Also, we have national annual reports that are being published annually on the national website, and I wanted to see this report enlarged. It is a very interesting report, and it could include more information on the local level. Everything which I already presented was about the national level, but if we go lower to the lower levels, regional levels are underrepresented, and local authorities, they have tools to do it, but they have to learn how to do it. And specifically, they might do it at the level of regions of our country, but specifically by cities, no, I don't think it would be possible, because local executive authorities, they don't collect such information, they don't present it publicly. And of course, the most difficult thing is to teach regional authorities to work with this. In general, regarding our case studies, it was conducted by my colleague Alena Ritelgan, and she was coordinating renewable energy projects, and we have a few sources where you can collect this information about RES, and in some sources you can find information about already implemented projects, while in other sources you can find only planned projects that are in their inception phase. So now we are ready to publish this mapping results, mapping of renewables. And so far we have studied successful cases on renewables, and it was a renewable solar panel project, and it was a very good project, but even there we saw that there was a problem with climate justice, because the project was used or was implemented on the land which was priorly used for grazing. So the justice question is not clear here. And they have a center of green technologies. They have a good system of environmental risk assessment at the level of projects that are supported by the grants. Speaking about the solar power plant project, it has been funded by the European Bank on Reconstruction and Development. Normally, we receive such information in the context of environmental impact. And these type of projects are being assessed against the need of assessing environmental risks. And normally they are not being assessed because they don't produce any emissions, and thus we don't receive this information. So this is the challenge which we have to face regularly, and it's not only a challenge for Kazakhstan. So recommendations briefly. We see that there is a need to set target indicators by sectors to systematize the climate policy in order to have more things to work with. Specifically by sectors, industrial sector, agricultural sector, etc. Because some people are interested in specific sectors to know emissions there. And besides that, when we see general number calculated of all general emissions with all sectors cumulatively, it is not very serious because you don't know what to work with, what is the major sources, what progress have been reached. Initiating shaping of the regional and local climate policies. This is a very challenging task. The day before yesterday, I had a meeting with representatives of the ministry, and out of 13 employees who have to work in this team. In fact, they have only 3 people working there in each department. So we see that these teams are under-equipped, and knowing these people who work there, I understand that we can demand, but demanding will not help us. So that is why we try ourselves to build somehow this transparency of these policies, but we have to put a lot of effort in order to have a local climate policy developed. And our next step is to engage more actively local authorities in climate actions, and then ensure regular inflow of information on local climate actions. It could be done, of course, under the existing national reporting system to make them inquire information separately, city by city, region by region, sector by sector, so that we could have such information at least. And it could be an order prepared by the national authorities in order to have this type of information from the regional authorities. And this would help us to increase the potential, but also to receive information, regional information of what is happening in each region and their possible climate actions there. Of course, we have to somehow bridge this gap. We have to have more requests for more orders for this local surveys. And then we have to assess the plans and programs. Unfortunately, this tool is not being implemented now, but we're not using it at the moment. Specifically, I'm speaking about accelerating the deployment of the strategic environmental assessment. So we will use this tool later next year. Then we have to reconsider EIA screening tool. And we are analyzing the procedures in order to, we tried to do our work and to assess in such a way so that we are not putting more challenges and obstacles on the way of those who want to implement renewable RES projects. So recently, for example, I worked with an association, Kazakh Green, where they work on voluntary certification and certification on greenhouse gas emissions. And once such company is submitting its project for certification, they have to be assessed. Specifically, there is assessment on the impact on the environment and on the local communities. So, and in the framework of this assessment, we have to establish whether there is climate justice. In order to establish whether there is or there is no, we have to receive certain data. We can't be subjective in this assessment. There should be some foundation, some basis for assessing climate justice. At the moment, climate justice is a subject to politics, unfortunately, in Kazakhstan. So that's it, and I'm very happy that new colleagues joined us, and we already agreed on joining our efforts in order to improve transparency of climate policies in Kazakhstan. And as I already mentioned, we are trying to bridge existing gaps by our own efforts within ministries. And even here in this project, I came to one of the meetings with the ministries, and we decided that we will develop videos that would communicate in simple words the climate policies. We already created the first video for this campaign, and this video is in Russian language, and we can, I think, later translate it into English and Kazakh languages. So thank you so much.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Vadim, for your presentation, and thanks for advertising your video already. This is great efforts that you put in raising awareness about climate. Now I'm wondering if anybody has questions of clarifications to Vadim. While you're thinking, I have already one, Vadim. I was wondering, you mentioned the participation process when they developed the climate neutral strategy 2060. And I was wondering, you mentioned the special meeting that you found more meaningful at the online platform. And I was thinking, who was invited to the special meeting? Did civil society organization get invites? Were they selected somehow, or could anybody join the meetings? Yeah, to contribute to the development of the strategy. That's what I'm interested in.
It was personal invitation. I was invited, and also another person from representing civil society was the chairperson of the Eco Forum of NGOs of Kazakhstan. Then there were some representatives of universities, experts, deputies to the parliament. At least two persons. So it was, I would say, many people from the public participation, as you know, consistent with the standards on public participation. Of course, there was no invitation for anybody to participate, or it will be a very subjective selection of participants. Yeah, that's based on their understanding that this person can contribute more than the other ones. That's why, but it was effective, I would say.
I see. Thank you. If anybody else has questions, I see Johannes' hand raised. Go ahead, Johannes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, myself, I'd like to ask you about those peoples that you use for participant in locally. You understand?
I didn't understand.
No, I didn't. Yeah, no, I didn't hear.
Can you repeat this, please?
Yeah, I'm asking about those peoples or that the age that you use during the participation in climate action in local levels.
You mean which people? I didn't get
Which people, yes.
which people you rely on the local level to
No,
implement climate action? Is
yes.
it what you're asking? Did I get this right?
I'm
Okay.
asking about the age. Either from kindergarten students, still different age, or university, or
Okay.
people from the street, that like that.
Okay. Okay. I would say it depends of types of climate action. Of course, in terms of planting trees, the students from universities are actively engaged in these activities, and we expecting that will be the similar approach will be applied to the planting of 2 billion trees on forest lands. Then, of course, we currently on the project level, mostly we are dealing with some projects. For instance, the main source of funding such projects are international organizations or climate specialized funds like GF. GF Small Grants Program, one of the best, I think, the best example of such an approach of thinking climate action at the local level. Of course, it might be sometimes in most cases, it's rural communities, and sometimes the urban communities. Then in urban communities, sometimes, but not in Kazakhstan, they are that not. I never experienced that any actions when they gathering to protest of the inactivity of the government on climate action. Yeah, that's I would say rural communities and then students on planting trees.
Okay, thank you. But in my addition, I would like to say in climate adaptation, we need to start to give the students education from the kindergarten, participate in different activity like planting tree, afforestation, so to understand the importance of planting tree and to understand the effect that due to the climate changes. So to understand everything that is going on about the climate change in worldwide.
So you're saying education is key, right? For mitigation and adaptation too. And I think we all agree in the room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Johannes, for your contribution. We have another question on the chat from Mariam. She's thanking Andrei and Vadim in first place, and then she's asking Vadim whether the Kazakh government considers hydropower as renewables, and if they're also exempted from the EIA, so the environmental impact assessment.
So first, the short answer that large hydropower plants are not determined as renewables. There is a threshold for the renewables. So small hydropower plants are determined as renewables. And then, of course, there are two large hydropower plants projects are still they are subject to EIA in most cases. So that concerns the renewables. As I said, in that case, it's what the solar power plant, which was developed on the lands which were used in the past for pasture, as pasture. That's why there's still some aspects of impact, social impacts, environmental impacts in some other cases.
Okay, thank you, Vadim. If any questions, I still have one for Andrei. Vadim explained that in Kazakhstan they have a system of recording emissions data from large facilities, at least. Is there a similar system in Moldova? I know that you said national communication relies heavily on statistical data derived from energy data, for example. But is there any monitoring on facilities emissions in Moldova?
Yes, sure. First of all, of course, according to the procedure, every company from the energy sector, from power plants, yes, or other facilities, they have to report the emissions according to the authorizations, because they receive the special emission authorizations, and this is, of course, reported to the statistics, and also it is reported, that we have the PRTR system, so the register of emissions, which is used also for companies to report. But when we speak about the reporting to the convention, of course, we use the national data. So we don't use a specific data from a specific company. Yes, we try to ensure that all companies report, or we don't have too much experience of self-monitoring. There exist large companies like cement companies, like companies who big power plants who have self-monitoring of the emissions, and then for them it's much easier to report on this.
So you're saying that there are huge gaps in statistical data that should be filled because only the larger facilities have their own monitoring system. Did I get you
yes,
right?
But yeah, it's not a gap. I would think it's an methodological gap, because they report according to the emission values and the emission standards they have. But of course, it's a problem when you have to check 100% if they reported 100% emissions, or they reported only according to the calculations which they could make annually based on the production. So that's a different, of course, approach.
I see. Okay. So anybody has another question? We have 1 minute left. I would use it for one quick question to Vadim. Is there any chance that climate issues, climate measures could be advocated into the territorial development plans that you mentioned at the oblast level? So, or is it only top to the bottom approach, so there's no chance that civil society can advocate climate topics into the development plans at the local level?
There is an obvious entry point for advocating at the local level to introduce climate policy. It's the climate adaptation, which is required not only, but currently it's limited only to the oblast level, regions. Yeah, no, not the smaller
Municipalities, you mean?
Yeah, municipalities. It's large cities plus regions. So
I
at
see.
that level, it's possible.
Okay.
And we can do it in, I say, in the next 2-3 years. Request them to promote
Okay, so there's
to integrate.
So there's still hope. That's a good
Yeah.
end of our session. I'm glad you had a positive answer to my question. So it leaves me with thanking both of you, Andrei and Vadim, and the support of colleagues from CAN EECCA, Olya, Nurjan, Nagisa, Baktigul. Thank you for helping out to organize this session, and all of you who participated today. Thank you very much. We will share the recording online on the CAN EECCA YouTube channel. And you will have still access to the presentations of our two colleagues, Andrei and Vadim. So thanks for being here today, and I hope to see you soon. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Right.
Thank you very much.